The drive along the Pacific Coast Highway toward Monterey should have been pure celebration. Arthur Hayes kept both hands steady on the leather-wrapped wheel of the black SUV, the ocean an endless sheet of hammered silver to his left. Beside him, Claire hummed along with the radio, one bare foot propped against the dash, the late afternoon light turning her profile gold. In the back seat, their children had somehow declared a truce. 12-year-old Leo had abandoned his headphones. 8-year-old Maya pressed her face to the glass, counting the coves that opened and closed like secrets along the cliffs. 6 months of planning had gone into this week. 15 years of marriage. 2 brutal years steering the architectural redesign of a downtown commercial plaza that had finally paid out in a bonus large enough to buy them 5 nights they would never ordinarily afford. The Grand Azure sat tucked into a private cove south of the city, a place of terracotta roofs, cascading infinity pools, and the kind of quiet money that preferred not to be noticed. Arthur wanted his family to taste it once without apology. Valets in crisp white uniforms met them at the gate. The air smelled of salt and night-blooming jasmine. Maya whispered, "Wow," as if the word itself might break the spell. Leo tugged off his headphones and stared. Arthur handed over the keys and felt, for a moment, the pure, uncomplicated pride of a man who had earned this. The moment they stepped through the towering glass doors into the lobby, the warmth vanished. The interior was a cathedral of modern luxury. Vaulted ceilings, a chandelier that looked like frozen rain, floors of imported Italian marble that reflected every footstep. Arthur approached the front desk with his leather weekender over one shoulder and a polite smile already prepared. Behind the polished mahogany counter stood a man in a tailored Navy suit, whose name tag read Gregory Fisk, Guest Relations Manager. Fisk was late 40s, thinning hair slicked back with the severity of a man who measured the world in hierarchies. He had been beaming at an older white couple seconds earlier. The smile dissolved the instant his eyes completed their rapid assessment of Arthur, Claire, and the 2 children. "Can I help you?" The tone was flat, clipped, already suspicious. "Checking in," Arthur said, sliding his platinum card and license across the wood. "Reservation under Hayes, Arthur and Claire." Fisk did not touch the cards. He leaned forward, fingertips resting on the counter like a man bracing for unpleasantness. "Sir, are you certain you have the right property? The Grand Azure is private reservations only. The Oceanic Motor Inn is about 3 miles farther down the coast." Claire stiffened. A pediatric nurse who spent her days reading the smallest shifts in a child's breathing. She possessed a finely tuned radar for hostility dressed as procedure. Arthur felt her hand brush his elbow, warning and solidarity in one touch. "I am perfectly aware of where I am, Mr. Fisk," Arthur answered, voice calm, carrying the quiet authority of boardrooms and construction sites. "I booked the Ocean View Cabana Suite 6 months ago." Fisk exhaled a small, dismissive sigh, finally picked up the cards, and began tapping at his keyboard. His eyes narrowed. He typed, paused, frowned. "Hayes, I see a reservation, yes, but the system is showing an issue with the payment method on file. We require a substantial incidental hold for the suite." "That's a premium corporate card with no preset limit," Arthur said softly. "Run it." Fisk's jaw tightened. He swiped the card. The machine chimed cheerful approval almost instantly. Fisk stared at the green light as though it had personally betrayed him. Without another word, he printed the forms, slammed them onto the desk, and slid 2 sleek black keycards across. "Suite 402, pool closes at 10. Try to keep the children's noise level down. Our guests come here for tranquility." "We are your guests, Mr. Fisk," Claire said, her voice velvet wrapped around steel. "We will enjoy the tranquility just as much as anyone else." Fisk offered a tight, utterly false smile. "Enjoy your stay." In the elevator, Leo looked up. Why was that guy so mean? Arthur smoothed his son's hair. "Some people just have a hard time doing their jobs, buddy. Don't let it bother you. We're here to have fun." The suite stole their breath. Floor-to-ceiling glass opened onto the Pacific. A private balcony, a massive soaking tub, a fruit basket gleaming on the kitchen island. For a few hours, the ugliness at the desk receded. They changed into swimsuits and headed down to the terraced pools. Arthur had prepaid for a private cabana, plush lounge chairs, mini fridge, dedicated server. Maya splashed in the shallow end while Leo swam deliberate laps. Arthur and Claire touched glasses of sparkling water and let the city stress begin to dissolve. The peace was fragile. 3 cabanas down sat Cynthia Langdon, a regular draped in designer resort wear and an oversized sun hat, radiating the absolute certainty that the world existed to accommodate her. From the moment the Hayes family appeared, she had not stopped staring. Not curious glances, but hard, persistent scrutiny. Arthur noticed and chose to ignore it. He opened a novel. 20 minutes later, Maya's bright laugh rang out as Leo splashed her. It was ordinary summer afternoon joy. Nothing excessive. Cynthia lowered her sunglasses, huffed theatrically, and snapped her fingers at a passing towel boy. She pointed at the Hayes cabana and whispered furiously. The boy looked uncomfortable, nodded, and hurried away. 10 minutes later, the shadow of Gregory Fisk fell across Arthur's book. 2 burly security guards in polo shirts flanked him. Several guests, Cynthia among them, were now openly watching. "Mr. Hayes?" Fisk's voice cut sharp through the water sounds and distant waves. "I'm going to have to ask you and your family to vacate this cabana immediately." Claire sat up, removing her sunglasses. "Excuse me, vacate? Why?" "These cabanas are reserved exclusively for our VIP guests and require a separate daily rental fee. You cannot simply commandeer one because it happens to be empty." Arthur reached into the beach tote, withdrew the black leather folio the concierge had given him, and handed over the receipt. "As you can see, I paid the $800 daily rental for cabana number 4 when I booked the suite. It's right there." Fisk barely glanced at the paper. "Paperwork can be forged or misprinted. My system shows this cabana as unassigned. Furthermore, I've received multiple complaints from long-standing guests about excessive noise and unruly behavior from your children." Arthur looked at the pool. Leo and Maya floated on foam noodles, talking quietly. They were the calmest children in the water. "My children are doing nothing wrong," he said, voice dropping an octave, becoming dangerously quiet. "And my paperwork is entirely valid. If your system is wrong, that is a clerical error on your end. I suggest you go fix it. I will not be spoken to in that manner." Fisk's face flushed. He had expected apology, embarrassment, retreat. Arthur's quiet refusal enraged him. "You are causing a disturbance. You are making our other guests uncomfortable." "The only person making anyone uncomfortable is you, Gregory," Claire said, standing. "We paid to be here. We have done nothing to violate the rules. You are harassing us, and we both know exactly why. Madam, do not play that card with me." Fisk turned to the guards. "Pack up their belongings. Escort them off the pool deck. If they refuse, treat them as trespassers." Arthur stood. 6'2", broad-shouldered from years of college rowing, he towered over Fisk without raising a hand or making a single threatening gesture. Fisk stepped back instinctively. "That's it." Fisk yanked a walkie-talkie from his belt, voice cracking. "Front desk, this is Fisk. Call the Monterey Police Department. We have a hostile situation at the main pool. Aggressive trespassers refusing to leave. Send them in hot." Cynthia Langdon smirked and sipped her mimosa. Arthur turned to Claire. "Get the kids out of the pool. Dry them off." Maya shivered as the towel wrapped around her. "Arthur, what is happening?" "It's okay, sweetheart. Just a misunderstanding. We're going to sort it out." Leo's voice trembled. "Are we going to jail?" He had seen the news. He knew what happened when people who looked like his father met police. "Nobody is going to jail," Claire said, pulling both children tight against her. She glared at Fisk. "You are terrorizing my children over a lie." "I am protecting the integrity of this resort," Fisk answered coldly. "You brought this on yourselves." They stood there 10 long minutes, ringed by the 2 security guards, while whispers moved through the pool deck like wind through dry grass. Arthur remained perfectly still, mind racing. He understood exactly how precarious the ground had become. An accusation of hostility against a black man in America was a loaded weapon. Wealth and education and innocence be damned. He reached for his phone, scrolled to a contact he had not messaged in months, and began typing. Before he could send, the heavy glass doors swung open and the atmosphere shifted from uncomfortable to dangerous. Officer Thomas Gable and Officer Rick Stanton strode onto the deck with a heavy, clanking swagger of men who enjoyed authority a little too much. Gable was a 20-year veteran, graying mustache, cynical scowl. Stanton was younger, built like a bulldog, hand resting casually near his taser. They walked straight past Arthur to Fisk. "What's the situation, Greg?" Gable asked, familiar enough to use the first name. "Thank you for getting here so quickly, Tom." Fisk played the weary professional. He gestured toward the family. "These individuals infiltrated the VIP area. When I politely asked them to leave, the male became physically aggressive and hostile. They are refusing to vacate and causing severe distress to our other guests." Cynthia rose and glided over. "Officers, it's true. I felt very threatened. The man was yelling, acting entirely unhinged. We pay a premium for safety here, and frankly, I don't feel safe with them around." Gable nodded solemnly, notepad already out. Then he turned on Arthur, posture squaring, hand dropping to his belt. He invaded Arthur's personal space. "All right, buddy." The voice was loud, the tone reserved for street-level criminals. "Let's see some ID right now." "Officer," Arthur began, hands visible at his sides, voice level. "I am a registered guest. I have the receipt for this cabana and the keycard to my suite. I didn't ask for a life story. I asked for ID. Refuse, and I'll arrest you for failure to identify and criminal trespass." "Arthur, just give it to him," Claire whispered, hand tight on his shoulder. Terror lived in her eyes. Being right did not always keep a man alive. Arthur produced the license and keycard. Gable barely looked at the license. He flicked the keycard with a thumb. "Anyone can find a piece of plastic on the ground. Mr. Fisk says you don't belong, which means you don't belong. The property owner's representative wants you gone. That means you're trespassing." Arthur tried to hand the folio to Stanton. Stanton swatted it out of his hand. The leather folder hit the concrete, papers scattered in the breeze. "Keep your hands where I can see them," Stanton yelled, stepping forward aggressively. Maya screamed and buried her face against Claire's leg. Leo stepped in front of his mother, tears already streaming, trying to be brave. "Hey, back off." Arthur's calm finally broke as Stanton moved toward his family. "Do not yell at my children." "Resisting!" Gable roared. In a flash, Gable lunged, seized Arthur's left arm, and twisted it violently behind his back. Stanton grabbed the right shoulder and slammed him against the wooden pillar of the cabana. Arthur's cheek pressed into rough wood. The humiliation was total. Hundreds of eyes, his wife and children watching him treated like an animal. "Arthur!" Claire shrieked, dropping to gather the kids. "I'm not resisting. I'm not doing anything." "You're done," Gable hissed in his ear, yanking metal handcuffs from his belt. The steel clicked shut, biting sharply into skin. "Let him go," Claire sobbed. "He didn't do anything. Ask the front desk. Look at the computer." "Ma'am, step back or you'll be joining him in the back of the cruiser, and we'll call Child Protective Services for the kids." Stanton's finger stabbed toward her face. The threat silenced her. The ultimate nightmare. She pulled Leo and Maya into a trembling embrace, eyes locked on Arthur in pure agony. "We're taking you out of here," Gable said, spinning him around. "Greg, get security to pack their room. Put their trash by the curb. They're banned." "With pleasure." Fisk smiled, profound satisfaction lighting his face. He gave Cynthia a small victorious nod. The walk of shame was excruciating. Gable and Stanton dragged Arthur by the cuffs through manicured gardens, past luxurious dining patios, straight through the center of the glittering lobby. Guests stopped eating. People pointed and whispered, "Look at that. I knew they let the wrong kind of people in here. Disgusting." Arthur kept his head high, jaw aching from the clench. Behind him, Claire walked silently, arms around the shoulders of her crying children. They were paraded like trophies. Near the grand piano in the center of the lobby, Arthur abruptly stopped. "Keep moving," Gable grunted, shoving him. "I dropped my phone in the cabana," Arthur said, voice terrifyingly calm. "I need it." "You can buy a new one when you bail out," Stanton laughed. But Arthur had managed to keep the phone pressed flat against his palm, concealed by the cuffed wrists. During the chaotic walk, his fingers had blindly navigated the screen. He had hit the contact. He had hit call. Across the lobby, from the bank of elevators, a very distinct, very loud custom ringtone cut through the murmurs. A blaring trumpet fanfare. Everyone turned. The gold-plated doors of the private penthouse elevator slid open. A man in his early 60s stepped out wearing bespoke Italian slacks, a crisp white linen shirt unbuttoned at the collar, reading glasses perched on his nose. He held his ringing iPhone, mild confusion on his face. Jonathan Caldwell, billionaire real estate mogul, philanthropist, sole owner of the Grand Azure Resort. He looked up from the phone. His eyes swept past the piano, past the fountain, and landed on the two officers, the crying mother and children, and the handcuffed man in the center of his lobby. The mild confusion evaporated, replaced by sheer apocalyptic fury the instant he locked eyes with Arthur Hayes. Fisk, who had followed the procession to ensure the removal, saw Caldwell and instantly straightened his tie, pasting on a fawning smile, ready to explain how he had heroically protected the boss's property. Caldwell did not look at Fisk. He did not look at the cops. He marched straight toward Arthur, voice echoing like thunder across the marble. "Arthur, what in the hell is going on here?" Gable and Stanton froze. Fisk's smile vanished. The trap had just snapped shut. The silence in the grand lobby was absolute, except for the gentle cascade of the indoor waterfall. Jonathan Caldwell walked across the marble with the heavy, terrifying deliberation of a predator closing on prey. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice yet. He simply advanced. Fisk, catastrophically misreading the room, stepped forward and smoothed his jacket. "Mr. Caldwell, sir, I apologize for the disturbance. We had a slight situation at the main pool, a trespassing incident. But as you can see, I took immediate action. The local authorities are handling the removal of these individuals right now. Your resort is safe." Caldwell walked past him as if Fisk were a piece of cheap, misplaced furniture. He stopped 3 feet from Arthur, looked at the heavy steel cuffs biting into wrists, then at Claire's tear-stained face, then down at the trembling children. "Arthur," he said, voice thick with disbelief and mounting rage, "what have they done to you?" Gable puffed out his chest and stepped between them. He was a cop. He was used to being the ultimate authority in any room, billionaire or not. "Excuse me, sir. Step back. This is an active police matter. The suspect is under arrest for criminal trespass, failure to identify, and resisting an officer." Caldwell's eyes were chips of blue ice. "Suspect? Trespass?" "That's right." Stanton crossed thick arms. "The manager called it in. These people snuck into the VIP cabanas and got aggressive when asked to leave. We're removing them." Caldwell made a sound that was half laugh, half growl, a terrifying noise. He turned slowly to Fisk, who had suddenly become very pale and very small. "Gregory," Caldwell said, voice dropping to a deadly quiet register, "did you call the police on Arthur Hayes?" "Well, sir," Fisk stammered, confident facade shattering. "His credit card had a hold and the cabana reservation wasn't in the system, and a platinum-tier guest complained about the noise and—" "Did you call the police on Arthur Hayes?" Caldwell repeated, stepping toward him. "The man who spent the last 3 years designing the entire South Wing expansion of this very resort. The man whose architectural firm I literally just paid $25 million to revamp my entire commercial portfolio. That Arthur Hayes." A collective gasp moved through the watching guests. Fisk's jaw dropped. The blood drained from his face, leaving him a sickening shade of gray. He looked at Arthur. Really looked, and for the first time saw the custom-tailored linen shirt, the expensive watch he had never noticed, the quiet dignity. "I didn't know," Fisk whispered, knees visibly shaking. The system didn't flag him as a VIP. "He's not a VIP, you absolute imbecile." Caldwell's sudden roar made both officers jump. "He is my business partner. He is a personal friend, and you put him in chains in my lobby." He spun back to the officers. "Take those handcuffs off him, right now!" Gable's face hardened. Pride was on the line, and in front of an audience a certain kind of cop always doubled down. "Sir," I don't care if he's the King of England. He resisted arrest. He caused a disturbance. He's going downtown. Now back away or I'll have you cited for interfering with a police investigation." "Interfering?" Caldwell whispered. He reached into his pocket, bypassed emergency dispatch entirely, and selected a contact on his favorites list. He put the phone on speaker and held it up. It rang twice. "Jonathan, my friend. To what do I owe the pleasure on a Tuesday afternoon?" The voice was deep, authoritative, and instantly recognizable to any officer in Monterey. Chief of Police Richard Evans. Gable and Stanton froze. The smugness vanished from Stanton's face, replaced by dawning horror. "Richard," Caldwell said, voice shaking with fury, "I am standing in the lobby of the Grand Azure. 2 of your officers," he squinted at the name tags, "Officer Gable and Officer Stanton have just assaulted and wrongfully arrested my business partner, Arthur Hayes, in front of his wife and children. They did this based on a fraudulent complaint from a racist manager. They are currently refusing to remove the handcuffs." Profound silence on the other end. When Evans spoke again, the friendly warmth was gone. "Gable, Stanton, are you there?" Gable swallowed hard. "Yes, Chief. If those handcuffs are not off that man's wrists in the next 5 seconds, you will both be surrendering your badges and your firearms to me personally at the precinct within the hour. Do I make myself perfectly clear?" "Chief, he was resisting." "5 seconds, Gable. 4, 3, uncuff him," Stanton hissed, practically shoving Gable forward. With trembling hands, Gable fumbled for the keys, jammed one into the heavy steel, and twisted. The metal clicked open. Arthur slowly brought his arms forward, rubbing the deep red indentations. The moment his hands were free, he turned and wrapped his arms around Claire and the children in a fierce, protective embrace. Claire buried her face in his chest and finally let out a choked sob of relief. Caldwell put the phone away. The power dynamic in the room had shifted permanently. The predators had just realized they were standing inside a cage with a lion. The lobby remained deathly still. Wealthy guests who moments earlier had been whispering and pointing now stared in stunned silence. Some ashamed, others morbidly fascinated by the carnage. Caldwell stepped closer to the family, demeanor softening instantly. "Claire, Leo, Maya, I am so deeply sorry. This is unforgivable." "They were going to take him away, Jonathan," Claire said, voice shaking with adrenaline and leftover terror. "They threw him against the wall like a criminal." Arthur gently kissed the top of her head, arms still firm around her. When he looked at Caldwell, the anger in his eyes was cold, calculated, sharp as glass. "Your manager decided we didn't look like we belonged in a cabana. When I showed him the receipt, he said it was forged. When I refused to leave a space I paid for, he called his attack dogs." Caldwell turned slowly. His gaze locked onto Fisk, who was sweating profusely and holding up both hands as he backed away. "Mr. Caldwell, please. It was standard protocol." "Cynthia Langdon, one of our premier members," she complained. "She said they were being unruly. I was just trying to maintain the peace of the resort. I was protecting the brand." "Protecting the brand?" Caldwell's voice was venomous. "By racially profiling a family? By ignoring valid documentation? By terrorizing children?" "It wasn't about race," Fisk cried. A pathetic, desperate defense. It was about the noise. "Arthur's children are quieter than the ocean breeze, Gregory. I've had them at my own house. You saw a black family enjoying luxury, and your small, bigoted mind couldn't process it. So you weaponized the police against them." He did not lower his voice. He wanted every person in the lobby to hear exactly what was happening. "Gregory Fisk, you are fired, effective immediately. You will not pack your desk. You will not collect severance. Security will escort you off my property right now, and I promise you I will make a personal phone call to the CEO of every major hospitality group in the country. You will never work in hotel management again. You will be lucky to scrub toilets at a roadside motel." Fisk let out a pathetic whimper. The same 2 security guards who had flanked Arthur earlier now stepped up beside Fisk, expressions grim. They knew who signed their paychecks. They took him by the arms and dragged him toward the employee exit. Caldwell turned next to the officers, who were trying to edge quietly toward the main glass doors. "Don't take another step," Arthur said, voice cutting through the lobby like a whip. They froze. You assaulted me. Arthur stepped away from Claire and walked directly up to Gable. He did not raise his voice, but the intensity radiating from him made the older cop flinch. You refused to look at my identification. You swatted my private property out of my hands. You physically assaulted me without provocation, and you threatened my wife with Child Protective Services. We were responding to a call of a hostile trespasser, Stanton said defensively, bravado gone. We have qualified immunity. We acted in good faith based on the manager's statement. Good faith? Arthur scoffed. He pointed at the sleek black dome of a high-definition security camera, aimed directly at the lobby, then gestured toward the pool deck. This entire resort is wired with 4K audio-visual security. Every second of our interaction in that cabana is recorded. Every word, every action. Let's see how your qualified immunity holds up against undeniable video evidence of battery, false arrest, and civil rights violations under color of law. Gable swallowed hard. He knew exactly what a federal civil rights lawsuit backed by a billionaire's legal team looked like. It looked like the end of a pension. It looked like prison time. My lawyers are already drafting the paperwork, officers, Caldwell added smoothly, polishing his glasses with a silk handkerchief. By tomorrow morning, your chief will have the footage, the mayor will have the footage, and the district attorney will have the footage. You two gentlemen picked the absolute wrong family to mess with today. Just as the officers looked ready to collapse under the weight of their ruined careers, the heavy glass doors from the pool deck swung open again. Cynthia Langdon strolled in, having taken her time packing her designer beach bag, assuming the unpleasantness had been thoroughly handled. She saw the crowd, saw the officers, saw Jonathan Caldwell. Her face lit up. She loved playing the victim and rubbing elbows with the elite. She practically glided across the marble, completely oblivious to the radioactive tension. Jonathan, darling. She reached out to touch his arm. Thank goodness you're here. The staff has been simply wonderful handling this dreadful situation. Those people, she gestured vaguely toward Arthur with manicured nails, were being utterly menacing at the pool. We were terrified. Caldwell looked down at her hand resting on his sleeve as if a poisonous spider had just crawled onto his skin. He slowly removed it. Mrs. Langdon, he said, voice dropping to a frigid, emotionless tone. Her smile faltered. Yes, Jonathan? My concierge has your file. I am instructing them to refund the remainder of your stay. You have exactly 20 minutes to pack your bags and vacate your suite. She gasped, hand flying to the pearl necklace at her throat. Vacate? What on earth do you mean? I am a platinum tier member. I have been coming here for 10 years, and you will never come back, Caldwell stated, looking her dead in the eye. You weaponized your entitlement to endanger my friends. You lied to my staff, and you lied to the police. You are permanently banned from the Grand Azure. You are banned from all Caldwell Enterprises properties globally. You can't do this, she shrieked, wealthy, composed facade shattering into an ugly, entitled tantrum. I'll sue you. I'll ruin this hotel's reputation. You can try, Caldwell replied smoothly. But I highly recommend you spend the next 20 minutes packing instead, because at minute 21, the police officers standing right behind you will be escorting you off the property for trespassing. Isn't that right, Officer Gable? Gable, desperate to salvage any shred of goodwill, turned instantly. Ma'am, you need to head to your room and pack, now. Cynthia looked around the lobby. The guests who had been her peers were now staring with undisguised disgust. She had been exposed, humiliated. She turned on her heel and practically sprinted toward the elevators, covering her face with her sun hat. Arthur watched her go. A profound exhaustion washed over him as the adrenaline faded, leaving the dull ache in his shoulders and the stinging in his wrists. He turned back to his family. Leo was wiping tears but standing taller. Maya clung to Claire's hand. Arthur, Caldwell said softly, placing a hand on his friend's shoulder. Let's get you and the family up to the penthouse. It's yours for the rest of the week, on me. We'll have dinner sent up, and then we call the lawyers. Arthur looked at the two officers silently, shamefully making their way out the lobby doors, careers effectively over. He looked at the empty spot where Fisk had stood. The structural racism that had tried to humiliate and destroy him had been met with a bulldozer. Thank you, Jonathan, he said quietly. He took Claire's hand, feeling the solid, unbreakable warmth of her grip. Let's go upstairs, guys. Our vacation is just starting. The penthouse suite was a sprawling masterpiece. 3,000 square feet of panoramic ocean views, wraparound balconies, a private plunge pool. But as the heavy oak doors clicked shut behind them, the opulent luxury felt entirely secondary to the profound silence of safety. Arthur stood in the center of the living room, staring out at the Pacific as the sun began to set, painting the sky in violent streaks of orange and bruised purple. He could hear the shower running in the master bathroom. Claire was washing the sweat, the sunscreen, and the lingering invisible grime of the afternoon's humiliation from the children. He looked down at his wrists. The deep, angry red welts from the steel handcuffs were already beginning to bruise, turning a sickly shade of violet. "Dad!" Arthur turned. Leo stood in the hallway wearing a plush, oversized hotel bathrobe, eyes red-rimmed, posture defensive and small. For a 12-year-old boy, the world had just fractured in a way that could not easily be glued back together. Arthur knelt, ignoring the sharp ache in his shoulders, and opened his arms. Leo ran into them, burying his face in Arthur's neck, small shoulders shaking with silent, delayed sobs. "I thought they were going to shoot you," Leo whispered, the raw terror in his voice breaking Arthur's heart into 1,000 jagged pieces. "I thought you weren't coming back." "I am right here, Leo. I'm right here." Arthur held his son tighter than he ever had. "I promise you, I am not going anywhere. What happened down there was wrong. It was ugly, and it was entirely unfair. But you need to know that we fought back with the truth, and the truth won today." "Why did they hate us?" Arthur wiped a tear from his son's cheek. "They saw their own prejudice instead of seeing our humanity. But look at what happened. Their ignorance cost them everything, and we are still standing." While the Hayes family began the long, quiet process of decompressing, a very different and far more chaotic scene unfolded 10 miles away at the Monterey Police Precinct. Officers Thomas Gable and Rick Stanton walked through the double-glass doors without their usual swagger. Faces ashen, eyes darting. They knew a storm was coming, but they severely underestimated its category. The duty sergeant did not even look up from his paperwork. "Gable, Stanton, Chief's office. Now, Union Rep is already in there." They exchanged a panicked glance and trudged down the narrow hallway, heavy boots feeling like lead. When they opened the frosted glass door to Chief Richard Evans's office, the air conditioning felt freezing. Evans sat behind his desk, hands steepled. To his left stood Bradley Walsh, a bulldog of a lawyer who represented the local police union. To his right stood a sharp-suited corporate attorney holding a slim silver laptop, Mr. Harrison, representing Jonathan Caldwell and Caldwell Enterprises. "Close the door," Evans commanded, voice terrifyingly calm. Gable shut it. "Chief, listen, we need to explain. We got a call from the property manager, a hostile trespasser. We followed standard operating procedure for a non-compliant—" "Shut your mouth, Thomas." Evans's composure cracked for a fraction of a second. He nodded to the corporate attorney. "Mr. Harrison, if you please." Harrison opened the laptop and turned it toward the two officers. "Gentlemen, the Grand Azure recently upgraded its security infrastructure. 4K resolution, parabolic microphones, cloud-synced redundancy." He pressed the spacebar. The screen flickered to life. A crystal-clear high-definition angle of the cabana. The audio was pristine. Gable and Stanton watched, horrified, as their own voices filled the room. They heard Arthur calmly trying to explain. They heard Fisk lying. They saw Stanton aggressively swat the reservation folio out of Arthur's hand. And then the sickening, unprovoked violence of the takedown. Bradley Walsh leaned in. As the video played, the union lawyer's aggressive posture slowly deflated. When it ended, he took off his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose, and took 2 deliberate steps away from Gable and Stanton. "Brad, come on," Stanton pleaded. "We have qualified immunity. We acted on the manager's complaint." "You didn't investigate," Walsh said, voice flat. "You didn't ask for ID properly. You escalated to physical violence against a compliant subject whose hands were at his sides, and you threatened his wife. I can't defend this, Rick. If this goes to a jury, they'll burn the whole department to the ground." Chief Evans stood. Jonathan Caldwell's legal team has already filed a massive civil rights lawsuit against the city, the department, and you two personally. The district attorney has been sent a copy of this file. She is convening a grand jury on Friday to seek indictments for felony assault under color of law, false arrest, and official oppression. Gable's knees buckled slightly. He gripped the back of a leather chair. Chief, 20 years. I've given 20 years to this city. And you threw it all away in 20 seconds because you couldn't believe a black man belonged in a luxury cabana, Evans said in pure disgust. Badges and guns on my desk. Now, you are stripped of your police powers, suspended without pay pending termination. Get out of my building. With trembling hands, Gable and Stanton unclipped their gold shields and unbuckled their holsters, placing them heavily on the mahogany desk. The dull thud of metal hitting wood was the sound of two careers dying instantly. 6 months later, the coastal air of Monterey was crisp and cool. The sprawling grounds of the Grand Azure buzzed with activity, but this time the energy was electric with celebration, not tension. It was the grand opening of the resort's south wing, a magnificent architectural achievement of sweeping glass facades, sustainable ocean water cooling systems, and floating terraces that seemed to defy gravity. Arthur Hayes stood at the podium before a massive crowd of local dignitaries, press, and resort guests. He wore a sharply tailored charcoal suit and looked every bit the visionary leader he was. In the front row sat Claire, beaming with pride, alongside Leo and Maya dressed in their best. Next to them, Jonathan Caldwell applauded loudly. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of legal and social reckoning. The fallout from the pool incident had been swift and merciless. The civil rights lawsuit filed by Arthur against the city settled out of court for a staggering $8.5 million. Arthur did not keep a single dime. He and Claire established the Hayes Foundation for Equal Opportunity in Architecture, funding full-ride scholarships for minority students pursuing degrees in structural engineering and design. As for the antagonists, karma had been exact and thorough. Former officers Gable and Stanton had been indicted. Facing overwhelming video evidence, they accepted a plea deal to avoid federal prison. They lost their pensions, received 3 years of probation, and were permanently barred from ever holding a position in law enforcement or private security again. Stanton was last seen working the graveyard shift at a regional distribution warehouse. Gregory Fisk's blacklisting was absolute. True to his word, Jonathan Caldwell ensured the hospitality industry knew exactly why Fisk had been terminated. Unable to find work at any reputable establishment, Fisk had been forced to move to a miserable landlocked state, working as a night auditor at a 2-star motel by the highway. Dealing with broken vending machines and noise complaints, he could no longer simply arrest away. And Cynthia Langdon. The internet remains undefeated. A guest dining on the patio had filmed her humiliating eviction from the lobby. The video went viral. She was dubbed Cabana Cindy. The public backlash was so severe that her husband's wealth management firm lost 3 of its top clients, and she was quietly asked to surrender her membership at her hometown country club. Arthur spoke into the microphone, voice resonating across the courtyard. When we designed this new wing, we wanted to create something that didn't just blend into the natural beauty of the coast, but enhanced it. Architecture is about building structures that stand the test of time, but more importantly, it is about creating spaces where people feel safe, where they feel valued, and where they feel they belong. He looked down at his children and offered them a warm, reassuring smile. 6 months ago, my family experienced something on these very grounds that tried to tell us we didn't belong. But true foundations aren't built on concrete alone. They are built on truth, on justice, and on the courage of allies who stand up and say, "Not here, not on my watch." He gestured toward Jonathan Caldwell, who offered a humble nod. Today, we are not just opening a building. We are proving that hatred is a weak structure destined to collapse, and that equality, dignity, and excellence will always outlast it. Thank you for being here. The applause was deafening. The ribbon was cut. The doors to the spectacular new wing opened to the public later that afternoon. As the event wound down, Arthur, Claire, and the children slipped away from the press and the schmoozing. They walked the stone path toward the terraced pools. The staff greeted them with genuine smiles and respectful nods. The atmosphere was completely different. The cancer of prejudice had been surgically removed from the resort's management and replaced by a culture of true, blind hospitality. They reached the VIP cabanas. Cabana number 4 was ready and waiting. Fresh fruit, sparkling water, plush towels laid out perfectly. Leo and Maya did not hesitate. They threw off their formal clothes, revealing the swimsuits underneath, and sprinted toward the water, laughing joyfully before launching themselves into the deep end with a massive splash. Arthur sat on the lounger next to Claire and let out a long, contented sigh, feeling the warm California sun on his face. There were no glares, there were no interruptions. There was only peace. Claire reached over and took his hand. Her thumb gently brushed over his wrist. The skin was completely healed. No bruises left, no marks of the steel that had tried to bind him. "We won, Arthur," she whispered, resting her head on his shoulder. Arthur squeezed her hand and looked out at his children playing freely in the water, safe and unapologetically joyful. He looked at the towering, magnificent building he had designed, reflecting the golden light of the afternoon sun. "Yes," he said, voice filled with a quiet, unshakable power. "We did."